Hey guys, I'm going to be doing the lesson a little bit differently today. There's not going to be a slideshow. I'm going to be doing a screen capture of how to convert a Photoshop file to HTML and CSS using some of the techniques that we've already learned. Now, since we've already designed our layout in Photoshop and we have all those layers and all that available, we're going to do that. And what I can do is provide, just in case you had trouble with your Photoshop file, and getting everything to look right, I'm providing my PSD as source material. So what I'll be doing is I'm going into Photoshop and here you can see I have the layout pulled up, and I'm going to start by just talking about the basic anatomy of web pages and what elements do what and how to handle them. I'm going to be referencing both the Photoshop layout and the original Netflix layout. And so what we're going to do is actually recreate this as closely as possible. Now, they're using a lot of really advanced techniques and frameworks and things like that, which would take much longer to explain. And so what I'll be doing is building off of what we learned already and using some techniques that you guys are already familiar with to replicate something like Netflix. Now you can use these techniques on any website, but we'll just be using the ones that are relevant to this layout. So first off, I'm using a program called Dreamweaver. This is made by Adobe. If you have Creative Cloud, this is available to you. If you don't have Adobe Creative Cloud or Dreamweaver for whatever reason, another app that you can use is called Aptana. Oops. Aptana is a free, I believe, open source code editor and file manager, and it works great on both Mac and Windows. So you can go ahead and get this. I definitely recommend it. But all of the file structures, you'll see they have a thing here for file structures, and all the coding is going to be identical, whether you're using Dreamweaver or Aptana. The reason we're using a downloadable code editor is because we're going to be dealing with local image files in a local folder structure. And that's a lot differently than when you're working online and you're pulling from different images and resources from different servers. So I want to show you first something I just discovered. It's pretty cool. I think it's htmlshell.com, and if it's not that, yes, it is this. This is a really cool resource which you can use to get an HTML skeleton or shell fleshed out very quickly. The reason I like this so much is they give you all these options on the left side. And let me just check my screen. Okay, it'd help if I switched. There we go. Glad I caught that. So this is a site called HTML Shell, and you can pick what you want included into your shell. So I'm going to touch on a few of them really quickly because they're kind of relevant in your general knowledge of how code works. So the first one is kind of interesting. This is include IE conditional HTML tag. What does that mean? IE is Internet Explorer. Conditional means if it meets certain conditions, you're going to apply this code. So I'm going to say yes. This is something, 5-10 years ago we had to deal with a lot. I think you still have to do it to a degree, but thankfully most people have moved on past these old Internet Explorer browsers. So I'll just kind of explain as I show you. So it says if LTE IE6. That means if it's less than or equal to Internet Explorer version 6, then use this special code. And if it's Internet Explorer 7, apply this code. If it's Internet Explorer 8, use this code. And if it's GTE, greater than or equal to Internet Explorer 9, use this code. So that's used really. The reason we have this is because every single browser basically formats the code that it's given or the code that it receives in a different way. So they're all interpreting HTML and CSS and JavaScript in different ways. And Internet Explorer and Microsoft has always been behind the curve like a few years. And it's, I think there's a few websites out there that are just like anti-Internet Explorer 6 websites. I can't remember the domain names, but it's something like IE6 sucks or I hate IE6, that kind of stuff. And so one of the biggest challenges of coding was having to get your code to look right in an Explorer. But I don't think that's as big of an issue anymore. The next one is kind of, okay, it says include common meta tags. So if I say yes, author, description, keywords, this is more for SEO purposes. So yeah, sure, we'll do that. Include favicon, so that's the thing that's up in the corner here. It'll include that code for you. And so all you have to do at that point is just replace where it says type, or maybe it's, oh no, href. So you replace this with the actual favicon site, and we can actually create our own favicon. There's resources for that. So create favicon or favicon, different people pronounce it differently. Favicon and app icon generator. So you just throw a logo up here and it'll create a favicon for you. So just for fun, I'll just go ahead and do that. So I'm going to go into Photoshop. I'm going to zoom in on the Netflix logo. I'm going to just select this. I'm going to make sure I'm on the Netflix logo layer. There it is. Command C to copy. Command N for new file. You can see it says clipboard. So clipboard is whatever you've copied. So it's actually copied the dimensions of that N, which is 24 by 46 automatically. So create new one. Paste. There's that N. I'm going to do Command Alt Shift S, or you can go to File. Let's see. Export Save for Web Legacy. And for this one, I actually want ping 24 because I want transparency. Make sure transparency is checked. Save. And I'm just going to call this N. And actually, I'm just going to change this to ICO. Well, actually, no. They're going to do that for me. So I'm doing that. N.png. Go back to this website. Choose the file. I have it saved here. Create favicon. And before I do that, it has a couple of options. Generate icon for web, Android, all that. Or only the 16 by 16. That's all I'm going to create. Maintain image dimensions. I'm going to uncheck that. Include your thing in public gallery. Nah. Create favicon. Now, I don't like this because it cropped it to be a square. So I'm actually going to maintain image dimensions. There it goes. Okay, so here it is. So download the generated favicon. Here it is. Show in Finder. There it is. So I'm going to drag that. And I actually did a lesson before this. I'm having to I recorded an hour lesson and realized it was cropped. So that's what this is. So I'm re-recording the lesson. But under IMG, you'll see favicon.ico. So that's the file. So we'll use that later. But this folder structure here is I've got an index.html file, which we'll be creating. And then I have an IMG folder within that folder, which I'm going to put all of my images in. So I'm just going to, just leave that the way it is. So yes, there's the favicon code. Include Google Web Fonts. So this is great to include, and we've already done this. So that's a nice little feature, but we're not actually going to use any Google fonts today. Include CSS style. So we can either do linked, embedded, or both. I'm just going to do embedded today, just because we're doing one page. If we had multiple pages, I would do linked, and then I'd have a separate CSS file. Include Google Analytics, yes or no. It'll throw that code in there. And this is, Google Analytics is a way for you to track your visitors. So if you have a blog and you want to see what countries or what cities people are visiting from, or what version of iPhone they're using, or if they're mobile versus desktop, there's like hundreds of variables you can get by using Google Analytics, and it's free. We're not going to use that. jQuery is a special JavaScript framework that allows you to do really cool stuff, and UI actually allows you to do even cooler stuff, like have calendar date pickers and drag and drop and tabs and accordions and all sorts of stuff. But we don't need jQuery for today. These are other libraries that are out there. We can use Modernizer. Modernizer just, it kind of standardizes your page a little bit with CSS. So we can go ahead and use that. So I think we're good. So I'm just going to copy, actually I'm going to get rid of this IE stuff. Just copy this. So I'm going into Dreamweaver. That's the old one I had. So in Dreamweaver, they actually have a way for you to have multiple sites set up so that it's easier to get to it. So you can see I have lots of different client pages here. And the way you create a new one is you go here to Files. If you don't see that, check Window, Files. And scroll to the bottom and say Manage Sites. So I'm just going to show you the process of creating a new one. You give it a name, so I'll call it Netflix. You tell it where that is on your computer. And if you actually want to upload this to a server, like if you have Bluehost or Media Temple or HostGator, you can actually put in all the FTP information here, and it'll actually create a mirrored version of whatever you created on your computer. It'll upload all that to a server where people can access it. So what we're creating here on our local machine, people on the internet are not going to be able to access. So for this assignment, I'm going to go to Netflix. So I have my Netflix folder here. For this assignment, we're just going to zip the files up and you're going to upload it. So I'm just going to create a new file. So File, New, HTML, create. And Dreamweaver, they've created a little shell for me. I'm just going to delete that and paste what I got from that website. So the first thing we're going to do is get that favicon plugged in there, and actually that is saved under img. It's favicon.ico. So I'm just going to type img/, and that's where it's located. For the title, I'm going to type Netflix. And I'm not going to include this because it's just for SEO. We don't really need that. This is where our styles are. So before I get into that, I'm going to have to explain how this site is structured. So we're putting our CSS here, and we're putting all of our HTML here inside of the body. Excuse me, I've got a really itchy nose. So here we go. What we're going to do today is just this top section, just to keep the lesson from going too long. And we're going to include this logo image, the sign-in button, header 1, header 2, and another button, and this background. So I would imagine this is all just one big div, this whole hero image section. And within the div, we have an img tag for that. We have an A tag, or an anchor tag for the link, H1 tag, H2, and another A tag. So let's go ahead and structure that out. And I'm just going to give them each IDs and classes so that we can easily identify them. So first thing we're going to do is do div ID equals hero, as in hero image. So within that, we've got our logo, img ID equals logo. and then source. It's inside the image folder, hero.jpg. And one thing I want to point out is that it has, and it gave me a little warning about this, we have this big long address here. And that's because this is currently an unsaved document. And so it doesn't know where this is relative to the HTML file, since the HTML file doesn't technically exist anywhere on the hard drive. So I'm going to save this as index. And the reason I call it index is because index is always the default HTML page to be loaded when you go to a root folder. So for example, actually I'm just going to call it Netflix because I already created an index from the first recording. So I'm just going to call this netflix.html. But let's say, for instance, I were to go to, excuse me, if I were to go to this folder and I didn't type any HTML file, it would automatically load index.html. But if I wanted to view Netflix, I would do like the domain, whatever, .com/netflix.html. So I already noticed I made a mistake here. I did not want to use the hero image for the logo. I wanted to use logo.png for the logo. So I'm going to highlight that, PNG. Now the reason I use, there it is, a PNG is because PNG contains transparency. So if this weren't a transparent PNG, this would have a background image behind it, or color. And we couldn't, so you'll see here, we wouldn't be able to overlap something like this, but this does have transparency. It is cut out. So there we go. We've got the logo there. And then next we have this button right here. So I'm just going to say a href equals quote hashtag. And the reason we use hashtag is a way to have it be linkable and clickable without it actually clicking anywhere. It's not gonna do anything when I click on it. And I'm gonna give this a class of red button. And also you can have multiple classes just by having a space. Red button sign in. And it automatically created this closing /a. If you don't have an app that does that, make sure that you always close out your tags. It is a nice luxury though to have that. So I'm just going to say sign in. Okay, and then we're going to have h1 for this first header. I'm just going to copy this, paste, and h2. Highlight this and paste. And then we have the button, join free for a month. So we have a href equals, again, put that hashtag there, join free for a month. Now, I want to point out I made a mistake here. And did any of you guys catch what my mistake was? So the mistake was I put this here before closing out the H2. So that should be actually below that. All right, so that should be about it. Now, I just want to point out also that this is all the HTML we need. That's all the HTML we need. Very, very simple. The way we get it from looking like this to looking like this is all CSS, which is pretty amazing. So the rest of this lesson is just going to be CSS. So one thing to notice, we have all these spacings. We've got a spacing here, spacing on the top, spacing here, space, space. These are all default spaces that have been added just automatically that we didn't ask for but they're just there. So what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to create a body, and I'm going to take away all the margins, all the padding. So now that gap has been removed from the top and the left. We've got our H1, comma H2. So this is going to be applied to both. We're going to set margin to 0, padding 0. All right, so now we've removed all the gaps. Next, I'm going to set my own default padding for this hero image, or for this hero div. So I'm going to say hashtag hero. And I went in and I already checked the measurements. So this is 40 pixels from the left side, 40 pixels from the right side, 20 pixels from the top. And it's consistently 40 all the way along here. So I'm just going to put in padding 40 px for the left right, and then 20 px for the top bottom. Now, hopefully you remember in the last lesson I talked about the treble method, TRBL, top, right, bottom, left. Now this is a special case because I only have two numbers. If you only have two numbers, the first number is going to be applied to the top, bottom. Second number is going to be applied to the left. Actually, my bad. No, that is right. I did this backwards. So this actually should be 20. This should be 40. So top, bottom is 20 pixels. Left and right is 40 pixels. And you'll notice we have the same gap now that we do here. So that's perfect. So I'm going to save. Now, again, if you don't have Netflix, if you don't have Dreamweaver, and you're not able to see this live view, what you can do is just go back to the file where you created the HTML and open that up, and that'll open in your browser. All right, and then if you ever make any changes to the code, like if I change this to a capital N and save, you'll see nothing happens. I have to refresh it. Now it changes. So I'm going to undo that. All right, so next I want to have that background image in the background. So I noticed from the first recording I actually didn't make the image quite dark enough. So if I select this, one thing you can do is you can hold down Option and click on the eyeball, and that's, it's going to isolate, it's going to isolate only this image. So I'm pressed M for the marquee tool. I'm going to select this whole thing, and I'm going to press Command Shift C. Now the reason I did this is because the first time I only did Command C and it actually didn't include this dark gradient. Command Shift C is going to basically compress all the layers that are visible and copy them all together. So I'm creating a new file, and you'll notice the width and height is 1920 by 1128, so that's the size of this thing that I cut. Create, paste, there it is. I'm going to save this. And as a PNG, this is 2 megabytes, and that's actually it's going to slow things down. So I'm actually going to change that to a JPEG, and now it's only 300K. So it's like 1/6 the size, just by switching the file format. So save that, call this hero, and I'm just going to replace the old one I created. All right, so now back in Dreamweaver, for hero, I'm going to say background, and I want URL, hero. All right, so a few things happened. I'm going to point them out. First of all, this is really short, and it's because it's adapting to the width of the, or sorry, the height of the content. And the content only comes down to here, so it's not going to show anything beyond that. Secondly, all the text disappeared, you noticed, because it's black and it's on a dark background, so it's just going to sink right into the background. Next, I need to add a semicolon, which is just a formality, but it's a good practice. And I just want to point out the syntax. So URL, parentheses, then the file path, and that's it. I'm going to set the height, sorry, the min height to, I forgot what it was, 600px, something like that. And there it is. So next thing is I want to change all the text to white for the body. So I'm going to go to body, color, hashtag FFF, semicolon. So that makes all the text white except for the anchors. So the anchors are always going to be blue. You have to target them specifically to make them white. So I could just go a color FFF. And that did that too. I'm also going to go text dash decoration none. And that gets rid of the underlines. So I'm just going to, actually I'm going to give this a class of red button. All right, so now I'm going to create a style for red button, dot red button, and I'm going to set some rules. So I want the background to be a certain color. I want it to be that red. And the way I find out that red is one method. So I'm just going to go into the doc. I'm going to press I on the keyboard for eyedropper, click on the button, and then go down to the color, and you'll see it has the hexadecimal color code right there. Hashtag E50914. Copy that and paste. So now it's basically highlighted, but what we have to do is add a little padding to it. So notice it's a little wider on the left and right than it is at the top of the bottom. So this is 20 pixels by 10 pixels. So using the treble method, we do padding. So top bottom is the first number. So that's going to be 10 px. And then the left right is 20 px. And then secondly, these are squared. We want to actually have a rounded rectangle. So the way you do that is border dash radius, and it's pretty small. It's going to be 3 pixels, and that gives that little rounded corner there. And you can see we're getting really close with very little code. So next, I actually want this thing to stick to the right edge of the screen. So this one is called sign in. So I'm going to create a new class for dot sign in. I'm going to say float. No, actually, I'm going to do position absolute. And then I'm going to say, and you notice I got rid of the gap above the top. And then I'm going to say right colon 0. And what it did, actually I can't quite do that, because it didn't, even though I have padding included in the hero, it's not obeying that padding. So I actually have to give it its own sort of artificial padding to the right. So I'm just going to say 40 px. So now it's 40 pixels from the right, 20 from the top. If we compare this to the website, there it is. Now the last main, there's two main obvious things. One is shifting all these fonts to Helvetica, and then getting the spacing right. So for body, since everything is in Helvetica, I'm going to type font dash family. So I'm using body because body is going to apply this font universally across the page. You'll see this suggests a bunch of lists, and you'll see it says Cambria, comma, Hofler text, comma, liberation serif. What this is this is a hierarchy. So if they happen to have Cambria on their computer, that's going to be the font that's used. If they don't have that font, this is the next font that'll be used. If they don't have that font, this will be the next, and so on. And it gets less and less specific. So the very last one you'll notice is just serif or sans serif. So I'm just going to use Helvetica new. And this is spelled not the English way. If they don't have Helvetica new, use Helvetica. If they don't have Helvetica, use Arial. If they don't have Arial, use sans serif. So now all of our text is the way we want it. There's a trick I want to show you. Right here you see it's all caps. You can actually create all caps using CSS. So I'm going to convert this just to I'm going to show you how you can actually automatically all caps that using CSS. Okay, so next we want to get some spacing here. So this is actually 200 pixels. I measured. There's about 200 pixels here. So I'm going to put 200 pixels of margin below the logo. There's many methods we can add this space. This is just one. So I don't think I actually created one for the logo yet. So we'll just create one for logo. Margin dash bottom 200 px. That pushed all that content down. Another way to do that would be to set the position for this to relative or absolute and set how far from the top you want it to be. So really there's no exact right or wrong way to do it. There's just, just depends on what's most convenient or if you run into issues. There may be a standardized way, but this works just fine. Next, I'm going to set the font size to H1. So you notice we have H1, H2, which is applying to both of them. I just want some rules for H1. So the font size, I'm going to set this to like 70 px. And just to compare it, looks like it's about the same. Now watch anywhere, cancel anytime. I'm going to make this not bold, and I'm going to make it all caps. So H2. Text transformation, uppercase. My phone's ringing. Transformation. I'm trying to figure out why this isn't working. If any of you guys spot the error before me, you can just include, leave a comment in your homework. Text transformation. Let me just try that one more time. Oh, it's text transform. That was the error. Uppercase. There, it's all automatically uppercase. And to get it to not be bold, I say font dash weight And there's a lot of choices. All these numbers are like specific thicknesses, or you have these generalized ones like bold, bolder, inherit, lighter, normal. I'll just change that to normal. Okay, looks about right. And now I want to set some spacing for these ones. So this is about 40 pixels. So H1, I'm going to say margin bottom 40 px. That was too much, I think. So let's try 20. 20 looks about right. And then for this button, so this one is join free. I'm going to give this another class of join. Join. So that didn't work. So I'm going to use position relative top 20 px. That seemed to work. So I need to be 40. Let's compare. About right. And there you go. You have a pretty well developed. See, and I just wanted to point out like what a huge difference CSS makes. So again, like I'm just going to comment this whole section out. And what I mean by that is commenting as a way to basically cause certain code to just not run. So see the difference that makes? It's crazy. So there's one last nitpicky minor thing we're going to do. Well, two actually. We're going to make these buttons highlight when they're rolled over. And we're going to add some drop shadow to this text. So to get something to roll over, this is called a pseudo class. So for the red button one, I'm going to make a pseudo class right below it. So dot red button colon hover. And that's that class while a mouse is over top of it. And I'm going to say background. I'm going to pick a color. Now, what I can do is just go into Photoshop, select that, and I just make this a little lighter, like that, and copy that code. There we go. And then lastly, I'm going to add some shadow. So for the buttons, I'm going to add box shadow. For the text, I'm going to add text shadow. There are two different types of shadows. So this one, I'm going to say box dash shadow. And first we pick the color. We want it to be black. All right. Next is the offset. So we're going to make it maybe 5 pixels from the top and 5 pixels from the left. And it's kind of hard to see because the background's so dark. But then the third value is how much it's blurred. So I actually want to blur it 5 pixels as well. And sometimes you can actually set like a transparency amount or an alpha. But then the other thing I'm going to do is for H1, H2, I'm just going to set a text shadow, and it's the same format. So it's going to be black. I'm going to offset it 3 pixels by 3 pixels, and I'm going to blur it 3 pixels. And so that's the final touch. So I'm going to refresh. And you notice when I highlight, you can see that drop shadow makes it stand out. And then this button, it may be subtle, but you can see on the top right one here, it's pretty pronounced. So I'm actually going to I'm going to pull back the offset just to 3 pixels. Refresh, maybe just 2 pixels. There we go. And there you have it. That's how you create the Netflix page in HTML. Now, this isn't responsive like theirs. This would take a few more hours if we were to include that type of feature, but hopefully you're understanding by now. You're seeing how all this code works together, how important CSS is, how to structure your page. And what I'm going to do is save this. I'm going to switch back to me. So I'm going to save this in a zip file. I'm going to include the Photoshop file. And what you'll want to do is just take your code and zip it up. So we've got this image folder that we created. It has all of our logos. So I'll include the images. And so you take that along with your HTML, and in a Mac, you're going to right click and compress two items. And then see, here it is. It creates archive.zip. Just call it homework 7 and put your name. So homework 7-J early, and upload that. And like I said, I'll include the Netflix PSD. I'll include the images, and hopefully that'll get you started. Hope you enjoyed the lesson. Hope you learned a lot. Take care.